What if you wrote the worst essay alive, complained about it to your local white nationalist organization, and was immediately flamed for it on the internet? Look at our juniors in college, bro, we're cooked! Hey, so Oklahoma is probably the scariest place imaginable for me to talk about. It is certainly a state, not only of land caliber, but of mind, and that is where today's story takes place. A junior student by the name of Samntha Fulneky approached her sorry, that is a ridiculous name. my bad. Let's stay on track. A junior student by the name of Samntha Fulneky approached her local Turning Point USA chapter to complain about a grade she received from her psychology professor. I think it was actually a teacher's assistant, not an actual professor, but the class was instructed to write a brief reaction paper to an assigned article titled Gender Typicality, Peer Relations, and Mental Health During Early Adolescence. From what I could gather from the abstract, it attempts to study the effect of gender presentation on one's social relationships and mental health, specifically as related to middle schoolers. Unfortunately for me, it is behind a paywall, so I didn't get a chance to read it. And I think Samantha didn't read it either. Also, an important tidbit which I learned secondhand from the beautiful and intelligent Cat Black is that the article apparently doesn't mention trans people once in the entire body text. Kat said that the only reference to trans identity is in the citations, and that's only because one of the sources was published by a journal titled International Journal of Transgenderism. Per usual, the worst people you know have turned this into a violent and choreographed attack on trans people in their ongoing attempt to intimidate, violate, and annihilate trans identity. Turning Point USA is an infamous organization founded in 2012 by someone I'm not even sure I can mention the name considering how charged this platform is. The organization's beliefs are typical of today's MAGA-fueled conservative zeitgeist, and they have the most vague belief section on their website I have ever read. The US Constitution is the most exceptional political document ever written, is not only pointless to the grand scheme of, politics, but you guys also support a movement that constantly seeks to upend the Constitution. So, above all, Turning Point USA is devoted to Christianity. Some may argue that it's white nationalist Christianity, or a violent misinterpretation of Christianity, a guise of Christianity behind which they operate their true goal of fascistic terror. Obviously not all Christians, but certainly these ones. Turning Point, the Oklahoma chapter of Turning Point, posted Samantha's full 650-word paper alongside this statement. Fulneky argued that traditional gender roles should not be considered stereotypes. She cited the Bible to support her stance that eliminating gender in society would be detrimental, because that would put people farther from God's original plan for humans. She received 0 points out of 25. Fulneky argues that the professor, who happens to be trans, failed to use empirical evidence and called parts of her essay offensive. They of course follow that up with a call to action, which hinges entirely on transphobia and, in my opinion, incites violence against this trans professor and also other trans people in the world, and more specifically in academia. Quote, "We should not be letting mentally ill professors around students. Clearly this professor lacks the intellectual maturity to set aside her own biases and take grading seriously. Hashtag trans, hashtag woke." Life could be so easy, and it's like people choose to make it the least easy it could possibly be. And by people, I'm talking about conservatives. The language used in Turning Point's statement is intriguing for a number of reasons. For one, I didn't know they knew enough words to make a statement this long. But also, their representation of the instructor as unintelligent and biased becomes hilarious once you read Samantha's essay. So, why don't we do that? This doesn't matter, but for what it's worth, I graduated in 2020 with a bachelor's in English professional writing. I graduated with honors, and essays were my bread and butter. I loved writing academic essays, and I have translated that kind of into a full-time job here on YouTube, though the essays on my main channel are way more relaxed than something you'd find in, traditional academia. That doesn't mean they're not good though. So I'm going to be reading this essay very generously. I'm going to save my beliefs, my human normal beliefs, for the end. And I'm going to pretend that unironically citing the Bible in a psychology course assignment about social constructs is academically viable. Just for Samantha's sake. First line. First line. This article was very thought-provoking and caused me to thoroughly evaluate the idea of gender and the role it plays in our society. Did it, though? Let me tell you right now, this is one of the only clear references to the article that she's supposed to be reacting to. There are no quotations, no thematic analysis. There's not even an allusion to the article after this. That's the entire point of the assignment, by the way. That's a major aspect that she's getting graded on, and she just doesn't do it. God made male and female and made us different from each other on purpose for a purpose. You know, clunky writing, which others have pointed out, but also this sentence would have been a great time to start citing something. Anything. She could have quoted something from the article and discussed why she agreed or didn't agree with it in relation to her gender beliefs and her religious beliefs. And if she really had to, she could have cited the Bible. I mean, the Bible is meticulously numbered and sectioned. It goes by chapters. And I think if you truly took it as seriously as you claim you do, you would respect the people who came up with that number system enough to actually use it. Turning Point USA claims that Samantha was penalized for citing the Bible, but as we see here and as we see in other parts of the essay, she doesn't actually cite anything, let alone the Bible. There are no in-text citations, nor is there a works cited or bibliography. It's not even really formatted like a paper. She speaks with authority, but nothing is provided to actually back it up. And if the purpose is to share her experience in relation to the article, which is one of the suggested formats from the rubric, she also fails doing that. Women naturally want to do womanly things because God created us with those womanly desires in our heart. Great place to start defining terms like what is womanly things, what are womanly desires. The same goes for men. God created men in the image of his courage and strength, and he created women in the image of his beauty. Great place, again, to put an in-text citation of the Bible or even a different source that has authority on the subject, you know, a religious source. I personally have never read the Bible, but the quickest internet search in history pulls up Genesis 1:27, which states, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them." There isn't mention in this passage or other similar passages like Genesis 5:2 or Matthew 19:4 of woman being created in the image of God's beauty, specifically, or of man being created in the image of God's strength or courage. But again, I have not read the Bible cover to cover. I read Genesis once when I was like 10 because I really loved, this sounds crazy, but I loved the Cain and Abel story. Anyways, that's not important. I can only hope that someone as religiously passionate as Samantha and as Turning Point USA claims to be has read the Bible, though. They should be able to come up with these citations. Another aspect of the grading rubric that's jumping out to me is this statement. Is the writing clear enough to follow without multiple rereadings? And no, absolutely not. No. The structure of the paper, like I said, is non-existent. You learn how to structure paragraphs as early as elementary school. In high school, my English teacher even gave us kind of like a formula for short essays. It was called TAPIA. So the first sentence of the paragraph would be your topic sentence, like what you're trying to talk about, and that is followed by the point of the paragraph, the evidence to back up your claims, and then the explanation of the evidence, followed again by the analysis of everything. For what it's worth, Samantha has a grasp, kind of topic sentences. Sometimes she even includes a point, but she routinely fails to provide evidence or an explanation for that evidence. She's really rushing through the paper and, quite frankly, regurgitating the same banal information in a rather aggressively non-academic way. Like, she just says the same stuff over and over again. It's frustrating to me when I read articles like this and discussion posts from my classmates of so many people trying to conform to the same mundane opinion. Mundane, oh. So they do not step on people's toes. I think that is a cowardly and insincere way to live. It is important to use the freedom of speech we have been given in this country, and I personally believe that eliminating gender in our society would be detrimental, as it pulls us farther from God's original plans for humans. Okay, so this part is frying me. There's so many places to start. Okay, I think this part is trying to lift a lot of weight without prepping first, like its knees are buckling a little bit. This first half is just not necessary. Just from an academic standpoint, it has nothing to do with the purpose of the paper or even her argument, if she knows what her argument is. It's also weirdly hostile to her fellow students, which should never have a place in academia. What I've been taught in college is if you disagree with someone, you do so respectfully, and you do so, again, with empirical evidence. You do so with data. You do so with like a claim, an argument, a point, a citation, anything. I think if you are going to keep this in the essay, it would help if you elaborated on it. How can it tie back to the article you were supposed to read? How does it relate to your argument? What is your argument again? It's a rather hostile opinion that was just added to the paper, and it just ends abruptly. Like literally in the middle of the sentence, Samantha switches back to the focus of the actual paper, and there's no payoff to the statement. I've had some of the most rigorous professors. I have sat in classes where I submit a paper and then got it back and it was written all over, you know, and that was always exciting for me because it gave me a chance to flesh out what I'm trying to say and learn how to make arguments and learn how to write. I love writing, so that was very interesting to me. And if I submitted this paper, I would not fault my professor for marking this entire part out and giving me a few question marks because, Also, the argument that eliminating gender in society would be detrimental because it pulls us further from God's plan, that also needs a citation, or at the very least an explanation of what God's plan is. How does eliminating gender ruin said plan, and what would that ruined plan look like? Like, will there be an apocalypse? Will society fall? I think the instructor makes a valid point that Samantha's overall argument ignores a backlog of psychological and social studies about gender and its impact. It also probably ignores the article she was supposed to read for this assignment. In my opinion, her argument is very weak in general. Not everyone is a Christian, or are they religious. Not everyone follows the word of the Bible, including Christians. So what about her argument is significant or persuasive? Why should we believe it? And what evidence can she provide to back it up? Those are the questions you really need to start asking yourself if you want to write decent, bare minimum papers. The entire thesis boils down to gender is fixed because God says so, and women have to be women and men have to be men because Bible. Even though really that has nothing to do with the article, again, just going off the abstract. You wouldn't even be able to turn this into a high school teacher without being pulled aside after class. On the bottom of the second page, we get our first attempted citation. Samantha says, "In Genesis, God says that it is not good for man to be alone, so he created a helper for man, which is a woman." Genesis what? What is the chapter number and the verse number? Turning point, do you know? Barring the accuracy of the following excerpt, because again, I don't read the Bible, so I don't know if she's correct here, and I also do not speak Hebrew, so I also don't know if this translation is correct. I do think the structure of this part is the best part of the entire essay. It has a purpose, which is to argue that women are equal to men in the eyes of God, and the argument is somewhat backed up by evidence, that being the Hebrew translation of the vaguely referenced Genesis verse. Samantha, girl, if you just added on to this part and, you know, did your job as a student, because what is it that you said on Fox News? If you don't do your job anywhere else, you get fired. Yeah. If you just did your job, girl, it wouldn't be that bad. You would still be failing to engage with the assignment rules, which is to react to the provided study about gender, popularity, and social outcasting. But, you would have at least tried. You wouldn't be celebrating or defending mediocrity. She goes on to state that society lies about how many genders there are, and that being who you are and who you want to be is demonic, which is very weird to say even outside of gender. It's like, how dare you want to have agency? How dare you want to define your identity for yourself? And then there's the conclusion. Funnily enough, reading this made me realize that there's actually no introduction to this paper, at least not a good one. The conclusion is yet another tangent that has nothing to do with the actual point of the assignment. She talks about raising her children to know that they have a heavenly father and that their identity belongs to him. She includes a prayer which talks about lies being spread by Satan. Quite frankly, if I was a psychology professor and a student turned this into me unironically, I would be not only confused, but a little concerned. Now, religion doesn't bar you from following directions. In fact, I think most religious people especially know how to follow directions. That's kind of the whole point. But this essay was ungrounded, it was sloppy, it was unsubstantiated, and it was rushed. It reads as though you wrote it 10 minutes before turning it in, Samantha. Better yet, it reads like you wrote it to get a rise out of someone. And me? Oh baby, me? I am rage bait. I am easily rage baited because I was already angry before I read this. This is not an academic work. This is not curious or measured. It's conservative rage bait. I would have given you worse than a 0. So be thankful. Let's look at the grading rubric provided so kindly by Turning Point. Does the paper show a clear tie-in to the assigned article? Again, the article she's supposed to be reacting to is behind a paywall, so I couldn't in good faith read the full thing because I don't do that. But just based on the abstract, I don't think so. The study seeks to find whether being gender typical leads to popularity in youth, and if being non-typical leads to rejection and teasing. That is, like, do you follow normative gender? Like, if you are a boy, do you, I don't know, go play in the dirt and swing off trees? I don't know, what do boys do? If you are a girl, do you wear pink dresses and glitter and love boy bands? Like, how popular are these people if they follow normative gender roles? It's a study of 34 boys and 50 girls, all of middle school age, and they were asked to describe a hypothetical popular kid and a hypothetical rejected or teased kid, and they were also asked to measure their own gender typicality and that of their peers. And I know if some people who are watching this in bad faith want to mention how I say axe instead of ask, that's a dialect. I am both Southern and Black. It's just the way we speak. Here's a citation. I know that you guys don't fucking know how to do it. Based off of the abstract of the assigned article, I would have never guessed that Samantha's essay even references that. It has no quotes, no real contention with the article's themes, and I would be very surprised if she even read it. So 0 points. Does the paper present a thoughtful or a response to the article rather than a summary? Well, she definitely didn't summarize the article, I think. If I was a generous grader, I'd give her 5 points on that alone. But then again, she didn't summarize the article because I don't think she read it. So that's the whole point of the assignment. And so I'm taking those 5 points back. 0. Is the paper written clearly? No. The conclusion is a prayer. No. The professor's comment on why she gave Samantha a 0 has more analysis and evidence-based arguments than the essay itself. She emphasizes that the grade is not due to Samantha's religion or her gendered beliefs, but rather stems from the lack of engagement with the assignment. You know, the way school works, that's what... The other instructor of the class agreed with the first instructor, stating that Samantha's paper does not count as a completed assignment, and also that parts of it were concerning. The funny part is, I got all of this, everything I told you, except for what I mentioned Cat Black said. All of this came from Turning Point USA. They willfully provided information that makes both them and Samantha look bad. Someone commented on their Twitter post talking about, OMG, why would you show us this? I thought you were on her side. But it's not funny. It's Quite sad, in it? The instructor who gave Samantha a 0 is a graduate student, and she was placed on administrative leave due to the backlash. A full-time professor will now serve as the instructor for the remainder of the school year, per the university, I should say. They did that to ensure fairness. The university is also currently undergoing a review of the situation to determine if Samantha was illegally discriminated against based on her religion, and a grade appeals process was also conducted, which, in their words, quote, ensures no academic harm to the student from the graded assignment. Ooh. Talk about DEI. Talk about affirmative action. What happened to merit-based actions? The university's actions are setting a very dangerous precedent. If students are able to skirt around the rules of an assignment and submit slop without accountability, so long as they write God on the paper somewhere, how will they be incentivized to learn or to do their job as students? What will entice them to submit thoughtful, engaged work? And don't get that twisted. You can write a religious paper and have it be good. Samantha did not do that, though. In fact, some are even arguing that she wrote it on purpose to see how her trans professor would grade it. Submitting her paper and her professor's comments, even the assignment rubric, to Turning Point USA Oklahoma chapter seems like a right-wing grift. Not to mention all of her media appearances that followed. But that is entirely alleged and of other people's opinions. It's intriguing to me how conservatives describe left-leaning people as snowflakes or, soft. You got soft hands, brother. But they regularly prove just how hypersensitive they are when they don't get their way. Conservatives claim to be against cancel culture, but in fact uphold it when it benefits them. They claim to believe in the gentle power of God, and yet they are vicious, unforgiving, and ungodly to their fellow people, their neighbors, especially people who are trans. I went to school with people like Samantha. Their Instagrams are full of beautiful, curated, hyper-exposed images that evoke Southern Christian camps and aesthetic Bible studies. Their bios are verses they know how to cite, and yet their behavior is routinely violent, dehumanizing, death-creating. Discrimination is not in the Bible, it's not in God. It is in you. You are full of hatred and you bastardize everything you can in order to use it as a shield for your own impiety. And your essay fucking sucked. To go to such extreme measures to coddle an ignorant and structurally unsound piece of work proves why Oklahoma ranks 50th in education. Governor, you have bigger fish to fry.
Hey guys, it's Kat, and today we are here to talk about a very controversial essay